Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to How's It Going, my update video series. Which one is this? I think this is episode 12. As you can see, a lot has changed. I have all this new decorating I've done in the, like 3 months that I've been gone. It's kind of crazy. Taking a break that long from YouTube. Yeah, I got posters, I got lights. It's pretty cool. Anyways, it has been a little while since I was uploading consistently, and I don't like in the past how my update videos seem to really just focus on me a bit, like, too much, you know? So, I want to change How's It Going. I want it to become an update series that is not centered around updates on my life, but is more just updating you guys on what media I have consumed lately and giving sort of like mini reviews of it, because obviously not every video, or obviously not every movie I watch or book I read or game I play or whatever is going to justify me making, you know, like a 30-minute long video about it. By the way, I'm being a little bit distracted by Blade Runner right now. Just because it's, you know, an action scene.
Nothing is worse than having an itch.
That one replicant, he has like a weird face.
I agree.
Like, no offense to that actor, you have a very good looking weird face. Yeah, I don't know, I just always thought his face was kind of weird. Harrison Ford's getting slapped around. Anyways. Oh boy, okay. Is that a good segue into the first book? No, because I gotta talk about Lord of the Rings first. So what I'm doing here, since it's been a little while since I was uploading consistently, I thought it would be good to focus this first episode of How's It Going since I'm back, to focus it around all of my favorite books, movies, TV shows, video games, music, and all of that, because there's probably going to be quite a few people who are new here who haven't really watched my videos that much before, and at the same time there's going to be old people here, maybe not like elderly people, but people who have been watching me for a longer period of time. And to those people, I am sorry that like I haven't been uploading very much over the past few months, but hopefully I can change that. So I just think it would be good to jump in back into this sort of new era of Madman's knowledge by talking about my favorite things. So we're gonna do books first. As you guys know, over the past year I've gotten back into reading, which I didn't read for fun since, I guess, middle school. Like during all of high school, I don't think I read anything for fun. School really made reading boring for me, and what I'll say to anyone out there who isn't a reader, because I know a lot of people aren't, is it is a little bit hard to get into reading if you're not used to it. I would recommend fiction. A lot of people like reading nonfiction, and like that's fine, but for me, getting into a story and a world is just so much more interesting. So I prefer fiction. That's most of what I read. I have read a little bit of nonfiction, which I'll get into that too. But yeah, what I kicked everything off with was The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. I had read The Hobbit before for school twice, actually. I had to read it in both 6th and 12th grade, oddly enough. A big separation of grade levels. Both had me read The Hobbit, though. So anyways, if you don't know, The Lord of the Rings is a sequel to The Hobbit. It's much darker. It was obviously adapted into a film trilogy by Peter Jackson, and it's an excellent film trilogy. We'll come back to talking about that once I get around to my favorite movies.
This is the One Ring, forged by the Dark Lord Sauron in the fires of Mount Dune, taken by Isildur from the hand of Sauron himself.
Bilbo found it. In Gollum's cave.
But The Lord of the Rings was actually written as one long novel. And when Tolkien took it to his publisher, they're like, nah man, this is way too long. So they made him split it up into 3 volumes called The Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, and The Return of the King. So I see The Lord of the Rings as one book, as one novel. It's just split into these 3 parts that are their own like individual books. The version that I have has covers from the movies. I feel like if I hold it here, it might look better for the overall shot composition. Anyways, these are actually kind of shitty covers. This one's alright with Frodo. This one with Legolas, I don't know, it's a bit of a weird choice. It's okay. This one with Aragorn, kind of a weird facial expression. Anyways, how do I sum up why I love The Lord of the Rings so much? So, okay, when I first started reading The Lord of the Rings, it was slow, and obviously I hadn't read in a long time, so I was reading very little amounts at a time. But as it went on, I was reading more and more at a time to where it became like an obsession, and I blazed through Two Towers and Return of the King much faster than Fellowship. And that's nothing against Fellowship. I was still getting into reading, and the story gets a little while to get going, which I don't think is bad. I love how it sets up Middle-earth, and it takes its time to introduce you to the characters, understand their journey, and be kind of whimsical in the start, sort of similar to The Hobbit. It really has a good tonal shift over from, the more fun children's book tone of The Hobbit to the really like gritty, darker Lord of the Rings, which is most of this. And honestly, I don't know if I'll ever get to it, but at some point, technically, I could make a whole long-ass video about the books and the movies if I wanted to. I don't know if it's worth it, considering both have been out for so long. These books were written in, I think, the 40s or the 50s. 1954 was the original publication. Man, so J.R.R. Tolkien, his character development, his world building, the way he incorporates themes of heroism and bravery and sacrifice and nature and beauty and all of these things into this epic tale that has like its own languages in it. It's just like, this is the most immersive fictional world that anyone has ever created. And I mean, I've only read Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, but I would feel pretty confident in saying that The Lord of the Rings is the best story that takes place within that fictional world. It's such a great, like, grand epic tale of good versus evil. And I feel like almost all fantasy that came after The Lord of the Rings has tried to replicate it in some way. Because The Lord of the Rings was just that impactful and that good. And if you've seen the movies and not read the books, that's fine. The movies are great. But I think what I gained the most out of reading the books, having already seen the movies, was just all of the things that Peter Jackson did not include in the movies. Which there's actually quite a bit. Like, the things that he does include, he gets them right. For the most part, they are very similar to the books. But there's so much detail and depth, and even large chunks of the start and the end of the story that he cut out simply because, he's making movies that are already really long. It completely made sense what he did with them. But this is just the best version of the story. And watching the movies again after reading it was very good. I definitely recommend the extended editions. I don't really want to get into my favorite movies yet, so I'll save more of that. I don't want to ramble too much, but at the same time, like, it's so hard for me to just express how good The Lord of the Rings is. It is easily my favorite book of all time. None of the other things here come quite close. Something else I do want to mention, not many of the books I read during my childhood are ones that are like super memorable to me. Obviously, I mentioned The Hobbit. The Hobbit is very good as well, not quite as good as Lord of the Rings, but I would recommend reading it first, I think. Anyways, like I said, most of the books I read during my childhood ended up not being that memorable. I couldn't tell you what most of them were about. I read like a lot of fantasy series and stuff. But the one that I can say to this day was a fantastic book series that I have gone back to read here and there. I want to reread the whole thing, partially because they are adapting it into a TV show right now. That is A Series of Unfortunate Events by Lemony Snicket. That book series, I don't have my box collection with me right now. I actually left it upstairs in my room. I forgot I was going to talk about it. But such a great book series for children and adults. There's so many mature themes in it, but told through these kids who have miserable lives, yet at the same time, the books are hilarious. There's so much dark humor. I really love the mystery elements that unravel throughout the series. All of the wordplay, the creative narration from Lemony Snicket. It's like super witty, and it's sort of teaching you about different like literary things at the same time. Because I would say overall, one of the main themes of A Series of Unfortunate Events is that it is good to be a well-read person, because you gain knowledge from reading. Madman's knowledge.
Violet, Klaus, and Sunny were intelligent children. Charming and resourceful. They had pleasant facial features, but they were extremely unlucky.
Yeah, I wanted to give a shout out to that. I haven't read it super recently, but out of the books I read in my childhood, that was the best. That like Pinocchio looking thing is weird, huh? Okay, another fictional thing. I've started reading some H.P. Lovecraft. Now, before I get into it, I feel like I have to mention the fact that H.P. Lovecraft was a racist, because if I say that I enjoy his stories without mentioning it, in this day and age, you know what that means. That would mean I'm a racist too. Even though I'm not. So yeah, I'm not a fucking racist just because I read something written by a racist. I'm not reading it for those qualities. H.P. Lovecraft is a classic horror writer. Unfortunately, I haven't delved too deep into this yet. This is the Necronomicon. It's just a big collection of his stories. He mostly did short stories, varying sizes, like... There's also really cool illustrations. But yeah, if you don't know, H.P. Lovecraft has inspired Bloodborne, I believe. Bloodborne there. Saw Cleaver from Bloodborne here. It's inspired so much horror stuff, like a lot of Stephen King, which Stephen King inspired Stranger Things. It's just, yeah. He has creepy stories about monsters that come out of the ocean that are like gods. He basically created the genre of cosmic horror, which is like horror that comes from people realizing how small they are in the universe and like being insignificant. I will now read a poem for you. Out of what crypt they crawl, I cannot tell. But every night I see the rubbery things, black-horned and slender with membranous wings. They come in legions on the north wind's swell, with obscene clutch that titillates and stings, snatching me off on monstrous voyagings to grey worlds hidden deep in nightmare's well. Over the jagged peaks of Thok they sweep, heedless of all the cries I try to make, and down the nether pits to the foul lake, where the puffed Shoggoths splash in doubtful sleep. But ho! If only they would make some sound, or wear a face where faces should be found! Reading time is over. Okay, some other works of fiction I've read. Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? AKA Blade Runner, but the book before the movie, and the movie is very not similar to the book at all, which is fine. It's a very good movie. The book is a very good book on its own. It tells a similar but different story, but very good, for some of the same reasons and some different reasons. Yeah, if you're a fan of Blade Runner, I definitely recommend reading Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, kind of a long title, by Philip K. Dick. I am 5 years old.
Hey, Idiwa. Let's see.
Admiral Kovishin Engam Bite.
He say you under arrest, Mr. Decker.
Got the wrong guy, pal.
Lofa, Nehojma. Devaja Plague, Cavan.
He say you Blade Runner.
Tell him I'm eating.
But yeah, I don't really want to spoil what the differences are. I found that to be really fun to find out as I read it. In terms of reading this after I read Lord of the Rings, I liked that it was more different than the movie, because in both cases I had seen the movie that was based on the book first. So, in terms of not having things spoiled, this was a bit more fun in that sense. But, I mean, Lord of the Rings is a lot better. That being said, this is very good. It's also a very quick read. Very easy to read, too. Like, with Lord of the Rings, J.R.R. Tolkien uses a ton of words you're gonna have to look up in the dictionary while you read. So, in a way, it's not the best book to jump into if you haven't read it in a while, like I did. I was just really dedicated to it, and I loved the story, so I put up with it. But this book isn't like that. You won't have to look at the dictionary as frequently. It's, you know, it's a lot easier to read. Okay, and then let's talk about Dune. So Dune, it was recently announced that Denis Villeneuve is making an adaptation of Dune. If you don't know who Denis Villeneuve is, I believe, I mean, yeah, I've talked about him some in the past, because like Blade Runner 2049, of course, but he's a fantastic director. He's my favorite director, and he's making an adaptation of this, of Dune. Dune is a science fiction novel. It came out, I think, was it 1965? It was, yeah, okay. So like a decade after Lord of the Rings. So far, out of books I've read, this is the closest to Lord of the Rings in terms of building a grand fictional world that feels really lived in and has like a lot of lore. This is the closest thing you're gonna get outside of like Tolkien from what I've read so far. Also, it's super long. Look how thick that book is. How many C's could we put on that thick? You think that's a U spelling out Dune? Looks like it's a C! Anyways, I'm actually not quite done with it yet. I'm getting very close to the end. I can't wait for the movie. There's a small part of me where, like, some of the lore things in the book, like with the Fremen, get lost on me. I'm not super into all of it, but I feel like being portrayed on screen by Denis Villeneuve, I would like it a bit more than I do in the book, actually. So, we'll see how that turns out. But that's not to say this book isn't great. It's really fucking fantastic. You can see how it's, like, inspired Star Wars and a lot of science fiction things, since I'm realizing I'm not going into the plot of a lot of these books very much, which is actually good. That's for you to discover. I'm just telling you what my favorite books are to give you some recommendations, but oh my god. This is just like, it's so cool. It's epic space, science fiction, fantasy, sort of blended together. It's on a desert planet, you know, sort of like Tatooine, except there's like a more realistic approach to it in a way. Like it's more focused on class struggles and, you know, sort of more serious things than Star Wars is. And like this one house or like clan is taking over from one that previously ruled this planet. There's hardly any water on the planet. All the rich people have the water. These poor people who live in the desert, called the Fremen, have learned to survive on very little water. It's very interesting how they do that. There's also these giant worms in the sand in the desert, and like they've learned how to deal with them, but they're like really big and scary. Yeah. All right. So jumping over to nonfiction, there's actually only one nonfiction book I've really read lately that I feel like talking about, and I won't even talk about it for that long. It's called Eat That Frog, 21 Ways to Stop Procrastinating and Get More Done in Less Time by Brian Tracy. In general, I'm not too into like self-help books, and I do think it's good to treat them with a degree of skepticism. Don't let whatever you read in books like this say, okay, I need to apply this to my life. Because you know what? Maybe not everything's going to work for you. But that being said, I think in general, this is a very good book about how to organize how you spend your time. And it is sort of geared more towards like someone who works in a business job, which I clearly don't, but a lot of the principles that it teaches you to use are still useful to me. Let's see here. Also, this is like a really short book. One other thing that I like, there's some chapters about technology and how it can be a distraction and it can be bad for you getting things done, but it can also be a very useful tool if you use it right. If you're someone who has struggled for a long time with time management and procrastinating and needing to get things done, like me, I definitely recommend this because, like I said, it can teach you ways to make all that easier. And basically, what Eat That Frog means is it means you have to figure out what your most crucial tasks are that will make the biggest difference for you and focus on working on them. That's the main gist of this book. There's more strategies and nuances to that it teaches and stuff. But that's the main gist of it, is figuring out how to spend the most time on doing the tasks that are going to make the biggest difference for you. One of the things, okay, if I had to criticize this book, one of the things that I would say is if you follow everything this book teaches you to a T, I could see someone becoming like too much of a workaholic where they're just like too obsessed with everything that they do, and it could just become brutal and rob you of joy in life if you only pursue being good at something. So maybe don't do that. Alright, and then the other nonfiction book that I read, I actually read this one first, is Sorry About the Mess by Hello Greedo. So if you're a fan of Star Wars and you watch YouTube videos about Star Wars, at some point you've probably come across Hello Greedo. He's a YouTuber. He always wears a Stormtrooper helmet. He's never shown his real face. I like that element of mystery about him, and you know, he doesn't want to share his real face or who he is on the internet, and I respect that. So anyways, what is Sorry About the Mess? Obviously, the title comes from Star Wars, the line said by Han Solo.
Sorry about the mess.
Yeah.
But yeah, the full title is A Star Wars Fan's Journey Through YouTube Fandom, Social Media, Fatherhood, and Life. And this book, it just talks about his personal experiences in life being a Star Wars fan, creating videos on YouTube, and how he's dealt with like clickbait and social media. And I've always really liked Hello Greedo's takes on things, not just Star Wars. I would consider him to just be like a very chill guy who just has like a calm appreciation for a lot of things, and he's not really into getting into like anything because it's trendy or popular or will get him views. Sometimes he makes fun of people who do that, which I enjoy. Not in the book, that's just like more on his channel. God, I'm probably not representing this book right. I really enjoyed reading it, not only as a Star Wars fan and not only as a content creator myself, but also as someone who lives just like in the current age of the internet. And it seems like everyone always has to be like outraged about something. Everything always has to be controversial, and I get so sick of that. So yeah, it was really refreshing to read this. I sort of wish I had filmed a video about this closer to when I had finished reading it, because a little bit of it has like left my mind since then. Let's see. He also talks about his time in the Navy and also his experience becoming a father. For me, I have not yet in my life felt that I would want to have kids. Like, I'm sure that someday I'll change my mind, but reading his experience of like the birth of his daughter, it's suddenly like something clicked in my head. I suddenly got it. I suddenly understood why people get like excited to have kids and how much it all means. Cause I don't know, I feel like for years I've had this attitude towards kids being like kind of annoying. I'm not super good with kids in general, but the way that Hello Greedo writes about it is so, like, understandable. And by the way that he writes, him not being, like, a professional author, I mean, I guess this technically does make him a professional author now, but having never written a book before, he doesn't have an editor, so there are some typos in the book that I did notice that, like, stood out to me as something that aren't usually in books that I read. But at the same time, I understood it, because this whole book, it's written from the perspective of, like, just some guy who I think has a really good outlook on the world and on life, and that's what I found to be valuable from reading this book. So I guess, I don't know who I would recommend this to. I suppose I would say definitely if you're a fan of Hello Greedo's YouTube channel, and if you're not, if you're a fan of Star Wars and you spend a decent amount of time on the internet, or if you create your own content, and, like, if you're sick of just, like, the kind of bullshit type of reporting and reviewing that goes on a lot in, like, mainstream content on the internet, and even less mainstream content with, like, clickbait content, or if you just want to hear someone's take about their favorite movies and video games, kind of like what I do, but in a book form, then yeah, that's what this is. I wouldn't say it's for everyone, but I enjoyed it.